This episode of Rooting Out the Probable continues to launch root cause analysis to reevaluate the findings of past aircraft accidents. In this episode, we'll look at ValuJet 592, an accident investigation that was overly saturated in emotions while it ignored factual information to learn from. The mistake in any examination is to allow emotions to control the momentum. Rooting Out the Probable has already looked at the National Air Cargo Flight 102 and Alaska Airlines Flight 1282 accidents to reveal the use of emotional baggage as an ineffective investigatory tool. Two accidents that are recent in terms of available examples. ValuJet Flight 592 occurred almost 30 years ago. It's easy to see with the more recent National Air Cargo and Alaska Airlines accidents how ignorance and petty self-advancement destroyed accident investigation quality. But going back almost 3 decades to ValuJet 592, it confirms for us that this nonsense has been going on for a very long time. Hello, I'm Stephen Carbone, and this is By Reason of Air Safety. Look, it's easy for any investigator to get lost in the tragedy of the accident. We're human, and these heartbreaks hit close to home, especially for those of us with families. ValuJet 592 was a catastrophe, 110 innocent lives lost in a split second. But investigators have one job to do: prevent tragedies from happening again. The true shame of ValuJet 592's report was that the aviation industry didn't learn anything from it. Vital information was mishandled or lost. Obvious issues were completely missed, and the complete failure to correctly interpret the federal aviation regulations by NTSB board members, NTSB upper management, the accident investigator in charge, the IIC, and the NTSB's operations investigator. These misses led to costly and time-consuming paths to nowhere. Accident investigations and safety enhancements are serious business. They demand serious attention to facts. This didn't happen with the ValuJet 592 investigation. The fiasco culminated in a sunshine meeting where 5 board members held a room full of observers hostage while asking awkward questions that covered nothing. We spoke in earlier episodes about how NTSB board members consciously interfered in the National Air Cargo 102 and Alaska Airlines 1282 accident investigations. The ValuJet 592 investigation is an earlier example of how board members injected their arrogance and ignorance to distract from safety. How can I make such claims as calling NTSB board members ignorant, or calling NTSB investigators incompetent, or saying the investigation was completely off target? I didn't. I merely read the ValuJet 592 accident report. I watched the YouTube.com video of the ValuJet 592 NTSB Sunshine meeting. It's impossible for one not to make those claims. I've taught regulatory interpretations, still do. I've taken part in rule writing, and I've seen firsthand how the NTSB misinterprets regulations found in Titles 14 and 49. From there, it becomes apparent how NTSB investigators contradict themselves, stumble over regulatory interpretations, go completely off target, argue feelings instead of facts, and presume to know minds of the accident pilots. In the end, one can see how incredibly useless ValuJet 592's AAR 97-06 report was. I have stated the facts quite clearly. I offer anyone the opportunity to challenge these facts with facts, not their facts, but facts the NTSB brought forth and simple aviation industry puts forth every day as facts. Before we begin, we must have a fundamental understanding. There has never been is not and never will be such a thing as probable cause. Title 49 CFR Section 831.4, called Nature of Investigation, states the NTSB uses these results of the accident investigation to determine one or more probable causes of an accident. The fact is that the regulations never defined probable cause. Now you may say, so what? My response would be, how can one find something that isn't defined, that doesn't exist, never existed? Probable cause only exists in criminal law, where it is defined, not aviation law. And by breaking down probable cause into two separate words suggests probable cause means a maybe cause, a possible cause. Probable cause doesn't come from a conclusive origin. It can't be substantiated. And from the get-go, before the ValuJet 592 Go team launched on the accident, they were searching for something undefined, something that did not exist. Let's look at ValuJet 592's probable cause. The NTSB determines the probable cause of the accident, which resulted from a fire in the airplane's Class D cargo compartment that was initiated by the actuation of one or more oxygen generators being improperly carried as cargo, were 1. The failure of SaberTech to properly prepare, package, and identify unexpended oxygen generators before presenting them to ValuJet for carriage. 2. The failure of ValuJet to properly oversee its contract maintenance program to ensure compliance with maintenance training, and hazardous materials requirements and practices. 3. The failure of the FAA to require smoke detection and fire suppression systems in Class D cargo compartments. Contributing to the accident was the failure of the FAA to adequately monitor ValuJet's heavy maintenance programs and responsibilities, including ValuJet's oversight of its contractors and SaberTech's repair station certificate. The failure of the FAA to adequately respond to prior oxygen generator fires with programs to address the potential hazards. And ValuJet's failure to ensure that ValuJet and contract maintenance facility employees were aware of the carrier's no-carry hazardous materials policy and had received appropriate hazardous materials training. To properly understand how the NTSB failed in the ValuJet 592 investigation, we must break down the probable cause in sections. Let's go to the first incorrect assumption section. The failure of SaberTech to properly prepare, package, and identify unexpended chemical oxygen generators before presenting them to ValuJet for carriage. The NTSB decided, based on a lack of useful experience with airline operations, to place responsibility for the hazardous mix-up on the SaberTech shipping clerk. The problem with this plan is the SaberTech clerk was such a small cog in the ValuJet system. A professional understanding of an airline's operations by NTSB investigators would have shown the shipping clerk was not the last link in the chain. Think about this. The 5 NTSB board members, the supposedly knowledgeable NTSB IIC, and the NTSB operations investigator wanted the aviation industry to believe the one person the safety of a multi-million-dollar airline was dependent on was a shipping clerk for the maintenance provider. Something else that must be made clear, crystal clear. In hazardous shipping, there is no such thing as unexpended chemical oxygen generators. Unexpended means nothing, since chemical oxygen generators are hazardous materials no matter if they are full or empty. They could not and cannot be shipped on passenger airlines, period. The mistake the NTSB made was thinking it mattered if they were not properly expended. That mistake carried over into everything else they did. The report was wrong from this point forward because the NTSB didn't fundamentally understand hazardous shipping. This is the problem in using inexperienced NTSB IICs and board members who aren't supposed to be involved in the investigation in any capacity, and NTSB investigators who don't understand the industry. ValuJet was completely responsible. How did ValuJet train the shipping clerk? What did the shipping clerk's training look like? Did NTSB investigators even look into the shipping clerk's training? If this shipment, the one that caused the fire, was made without consideration of consequences, odds are good this wasn't the first time hazardous shipments were made like this. How many times were hazardous shipments made on ValuJet airliners over the previous months? Did any at the NTSB check? And why weren't those shipments caught? Maybe, just maybe, shipping hazardous materials on ValuJet airliners had become a bad habit, even before the SaberTech shipping clerk was even hired. To add insult to injury, the NTSB pushed to have the SaberTech shipping clerk arrested for the lead ramp agent's error. Then the NTSB, in finding 11, said ValuJet's failure to secure the cargo was not unreasonable. What does not unreasonable even mean? Isn't it saying something is not unreasonable like saying something is reasonable? The dictionary defines unreasonable as not guided or based on good sense. So saying something is not unreasonable is like saying that it is not guided, not guided, or based on good sense, which is employing a double negative, so it doesn't make any sense. Nonetheless, did the NTSB board members realize dispatching an airliner with unsecured freight was a violation of safety standards? Unsecured freight? Why didn't the NTSB IIC or operations investigator catch this? The person responsible for the oxygen generators getting on Flight 592 was ValuJet's lead ramp agent for that flight. The same guy who admitted he didn't secure the tires, which did violate airworthiness safety standards. Tires shift in flight when not secured. In the end, these probable causes and finding statements were ignorant. One more reason NTSB board members then and today are dangerous with their illiterate interference in safety. The failure of ValuJet, so this is number 2, probable cause number 2. Failure of ValuJet to properly oversee its contract maintenance program to ensure compliance with maintenance training, and hazardous materials requirements and practices. In this statement of the probable cause, the NTSB pointed to failures to comply with maintenance. Yet in finding number 5, the NTSB stated the airplane was equipped and maintained in accordance with regulations. So if SaberTech was maintaining the airplane in accordance with the regulations, what specifically was being missed? At the time ValuJet 592 crashed, an air carrier's continuous airworthiness maintenance program, their CAMP, had 9 elements. It was overseen by the FAA. Now, without sounding trivial, which of ValuJet's CAMP elements were being missed? Specifically, they say hazardous training, but that's overseen by FAA security, not flight standards airworthiness. But why maintenance performance and maintenance training? NTSB investigators complained about maintenance practices, but didn't say how those practices violated regulations or general practices. This was because, again, the NTSB didn't employ investigators who understood maintenance. The NTSB presented what they sorta thought was a problem, nothing of which was grounded in regulation. FAA accepted or FAA approved programs. They were just things some NTSB investigators naively thought probably sounded pretty good. The NTSB demonstrated they were shooting without aiming. On pages 177 through 271, the NTSB included in the AAR 9706 report copies of maintenance procedures for oxygen generators, Title 14 CFR Part 25, Airworthiness Standards for Transport Category Aircraft, DC-9 Emergency Procedures, FAA Inspection Reports, National Aviation Safety Inspection Program Reports, Consent Orders for Enforcement Investigative Reports, Title 49 CFR Part 172, Shipping of Hazardous Materials. That was 94 pages of unsubstantiated information stuffed into a final report. No references, no specifics, no breakdowns, no understanding of what the pages called out. So for 94 pages, the NTSB baffled with bull stuff. In other words, 35% of the report is just inept fluff. The NTSB just threw information against the wall to see what would stick. The report talked about unrealistic findings in quality control, such as quality control inspecting shipments as in Recommendation Alpha 97-65. For the NTSB's knowledge, aircraft inspectors don't inspect shipments. Then there was the NTSB in Finding 22, stated the oxygen generators should be depleted before transportation. No, no, no. Depleting the oxygen generators was the manufacturer or the oxygen generator overhaul facility's job. They are trained to do so. No one but the oxygen generator provider should be depleting the generators. No one. Of 22 recommendations, 15 of them were already addressed in the regulations and all airline procedures. So why did the NTSB keep recommending the obvious? This raises the question, why was the NTSB going to extreme lengths to correct things that were already regulated? If only one of the NTSB board members understood what an airline's maintenance program required. Then there were the recommendations about pilots putting on masks, goggles, and emergency vision technology, as in Recommendations Alpha 9758 through Alpha 97-61. It was as if NTSB investigators suggested the pilots in a similar ValuJet 592 event should stop trying to save the plane and say, hey, the world is going to hell, but let's check our Jepsons to see if we should put our goggles on. This is backseat driving lunacy on a grand scale. Worse than that, it's lunacy practiced by what was supposed to be the world-famous NTSB. Even worse than that is the NTSB continues with the lunacy to this day with extra helpings of redundant lunacy. For a brief moment, we're going to skip probable cause number 3 and go right to probable cause number 4. Contributing to the accident was the failure of the FAA to adequately monitor ValuJet's heavy maintenance programs and responsibilities, including ValuJet's oversight of its contractors and SabreTech's repair station certificate. The failure of the FAA to adequately respond to prior oxygen generator fires with programs to address the potential hazards, and ValuJet's failure to ensure that ValuJet and contract maintenance facility employees were aware of the carrier's no-carry hazardous materials policy and had received appropriate hazardous materials training. The NTSB used a scattershot logic with this run-on sentence. The NTSB equivalent of, we don't know, so we're spitballing here. Each time the NTSB blamed the FAA for something, the NTSB never once asked, how could the NTSB help the FAA? Isn't that their job? When the ValuJet accident occurred, low-cost airlines like AirTran, ValuJet, People's Express, and Southwest Airlines were growing faster than could be safely monitored. However, the NTSB ignored these and other aviation trends. As a sole transportation investigatory agency, the NTSB had a responsibility to analyze trends like post-deregulation changes. Instead, the NTSB ignored its own mandate in Title 49 CFR Section 831.4 that says the NTSB is to prevent the effects of similar accidents. I demonstrated with National Air Cargo 102 accident from 2013, which is 12 years ago, and the Alaska Airlines 1282 accident this past year, that the NTSB never works to fix the problems they said the FAA had. Instead, the NTSB just went on and on about how bad the FAA was. The NTSB should have worked with the FAA to make aviation safe again. The NTSB should have conducted studies on the airline industry, worked with the FAA on getting in front of the aviation industry's safety issues. However, as I witnessed when I was an NTSB major investigator, it's easier to point out the FAA's faults than to proactively work with them. The NTSB could have conducted studies, appealed to Congress for FAA funding, helped stop problems like the continuing resolutions in the Congress, worked with FAA inspectors in key areas to understand the problems. But instead, the NTSB chose not to, and they probably won't ever. It's why I say the NTSB has done nothing to improve aviation safety for decades. Now, before we move on, there are two things we need to discuss. One is hazardous materials, and two is the term caused versus the term the cause. Let's go to hazardous materials first. Oxygen generators are not oxidizers. The chemicals used in the oxygen producing process are controlled hazardous chemical reactions. Without getting too technical, the release of oxygen to the passenger is through an exothermic chemical reaction. The fundamental point is activating an oxygen generator produces energy in the form of extreme heat, and that is, in the case of ValuJet 592, was multiplied by the number of oxygen generators affected. Once started, the reaction won't stop until the chemical is depleted. The oxygen generator produces oxygen, which is a Class II flammable gas. That was one problem. The second problem nobody seemed to understand was oxygen also reacts with other substances, such as grease, to produce fire and/or heat. The oxygen produced in the ValuJet 592 accident resulted from the exothermic reaction, but the fire was intensified by another chemical reaction, the oxygen being directed on the aircraft tire bearings full of grease. Once started, neither chemical reaction could be stopped. Now we'll move to an entirely different but vital concept to understand, one I outlined in my book, Aviation Lessons Unlearned, the NTSB. I've spoken about probable cause versus root cause. Probable cause only answers what caused the specific accident, in this case, the fire on ValuJet 592. Root cause answers the fundamental event, the first domino, if you will, the cause of the accident, what led to the other following events. Let me clarify. When I taught FAA new hire and aviation safety inspectors, I always told my students in every aircraft accident investigation, there are two truths. The first truth is there are those things that caused an accident, and then there is the cause of an accident. The second truth is these two causes are never the same. This may sound like rhetorical nonsense, but it's not. Let me explain. The term "that caused" is a transitive verb, meaning in this case that what events occurred that brought about the accident. There can be any number of these events, such as mechanical malfunction, poor design, pilot error, weather, etc. They can be singular events, part of a chain of events, or dependent on other triggers to bring it about. The NTSB calls this probable cause. The term "the cause" is a noun, meaning the fundamental reason for the accident. There can be more than one cause, such as ignoring operator procedures, or the Federal Aviation Regulations, which is a violation. These two causes are independent of each other. They are root causes. and root cause is the goal of any accident investigation. It is the true cause. Let me tell you a quick story. In 2004, 3 years after 9/11, a senator from California had a brainstorm, an idea about how to prevent a terrorist's explosive device from damaging an airliner in flight. Now, being a senator with just a tiny bit less aviation knowledge than your average NTSB board member, she thought this idea should be run by the FAA. I was the one who got to answer the senator. Her idea was to reinforce unit load devices, also known as cargo containers for wide-body airliners, twice reinforced with heavier aluminum. This reinforcement, she reasoned, should contain the blast of a terrorist bomb hidden in the luggage. But the idea lacked common sense. Reinforcements would have doubled the weight of each one of the 18 unit load devices on each passenger airliner, dozens more on a cargo airliner. This would require more expensive fuel per flight and limited freight, luggage, and/or passengers an airplane could carry. It defeated the whole fuel economy thing. And there'd be no guarantees the reinforcements would prevent any tragedy. Instead, I suggested improving preventive measures to ensure an explosive device didn't get on the airliner to begin with. Civilian airliners, I told her, aren't designed to withstand explosive device detonations, with or without the reinforcements. I told you that story to make a point about ValuJet 592. In the ValuJet 592 report, the NTSB determined that oxygen generators caused a fire in the accident airliner's Class D cargo compartment. The NTSB's solution was to modify the Class D cargo compartment to stop a fire, just like the California senator who wanted to modify the unit load devices to contain a terrorist bomb. You see, the Class D cargo compartment was safe the way it was designed to be decades earlier. No changes were needed. In the third probable cause statement, the NTSB stated, the failure of the FAA to require smoke detection and fire suppression systems in Class D cargo compartments as the reason the fire started and the plane crashed. Nope, not even close. What is so exasperating about the NTSB is their apparent lack of experience, their apparent lack of aircraft knowledge, and their fundamental ignorance of the federal regulations. These faults are on full display each time the NTSB investigates. When certifying an aircraft component's resistance to heat or fire during the design process, the manufacturer must test each item, such as seat covers, carpeting, wall paneling. These tests determine the item's burn certifications, or what we call burn certs, which give the item's heat and flammability limits. On pages 189 and 190 of the ValuJet 592 report, the NTSB posted Title 14 CFR Part 25 Appendix Foxtrot, which are the airworthiness standards for transport category aircraft burn certs. He said it again. They are the airworthiness standards for transport category aircraft burn certs, like for the DC-9. It must be understood that no part of the accident aircraft could possibly sustain the heat and focus of that fire on the doomed aircraft, no matter how high the burn cert was. And what is interesting is the way the NTSB presented these burn certs. Either purposely or unwittingly, the NTSB misinterpreted and misrepresented what the Part 25 regulations said. The NTSB distorted the regulations' intent. The Title 14 CFR Part 25 design certification regulations were determined decades earlier through testing that no hazardous materials should ever be placed in Class D cargo compartments. For 4 decades, nobody put hazardous materials in Class D cargo compartments. Ever. Not even cargo airlines. So why would the NTSB like the California senator I spoke of, want to fix something that wasn't broken? Was this an NTSB upper management agenda item? Why would the NTSB go out of its way to make recommendations so unnecessary? It's the way the NTSB thinks. It's convoluted. If anyone, any person, wanted to fly, for instance, from JFK to Philadelphia, they'd go the direct route, the easy route, southwest. However, the NTSB management does things the hard way. They'd fly east from JFK to Europe, to Asia, to the Far East, Alaska, and then mainland USA, and approach Philadelphia from the west. That's their type of thinking. NTSB investigators read only what they wanted to read in the Part 25 regulations. They saw what they wanted to see. It was a bureaucratic agenda imposed by bureaucrats. NTSB board members decided what information the public would hear and see. They got public support through fear for the ridiculous Class D cargo compartment modification. Based on naivete, the NTSB pushed for smoke detectors and fire retardant systems be installed in every narrow-body airliner in the United States. By instilling this fear into the traveling public, NTSB board members forced the modifications through. The modifications cost the aviation industry millions and millions of dollars in useless modifications. Understand, the oxygen generators would not have caught fire if the ValuJet ramp training ensured the ramp agents, not the SaberTech clerk, had followed their ValuJet procedures. All their procedures. The oxygen generators would never have been on board. So finding cause is not about restating the obvious. The plane was on fire. Anyone with a second grade education knew that. That was probable cause. Instead, accident reports are about stating the unclear. That smoke detectors and fire extinguishing systems hadn't been installed had absolutely nothing to do with the accident and had absolutely nothing to do with the root cause of the accident. To be clear, the root cause of the ValuJet 592 accident was 1. The failure of the allegedly hazardous trained ramp agents to question the labels on the oxygen generators and prevent them from being put on the plane. And 2, the failure of the ramp agents to secure the cargo, namely the tires. Ramp agents should have known they loaded oxygen generators, expended or not. The ramp agents should have secured the aircraft tires because one actually landed on top of and actuated one or more oxygen generators. That's it. The solution in 2 easy bullets. Make no mistake, these 2 events were the only 2 causes of the accident. Anything else listed in the report's probable cause was misdirection, inexperience, and ignorance, especially on the part of all 5 board members and the IIC, and as well as any other investigator who should have known better. The ValuJet 592 accident investigation was full of misdirection, inexperience, and just plain subject matter ignorance. The NTSB's habit of substituting probable cause for real cause demonstrated a failure to recognize the difference between what caused the accident and the cause of the accident. Finding number 10 stated, given the information available, the ramp agents and flight crew's acceptance of the company materials shipment was not unreasonable. There's that term again. And finding number 11 stated, ValuJet's failure to secure the cargo was not unreasonable. Again, with the not unreasonable. In fact, the ramp agents were culpable in both points. The ramp agents should have refused the unexpended oxygen generators because they were hazardous materials. Whether they were full or not, they were still hazardous. And 2, the ramp agents knowingly did not secure the freight, specifically the tires. The unsecured freight was reason enough that the airplane should never have been allowed to depart the gate. Did the NTSB have anyone with the experience to question why the freight straps were not installed? Why weren't the tires secured? How was this airliner in any way airworthy without secured freight? One more point that escaped everyone at the NTSB, and it seems in the industry. Why didn't the NTSB prove their recommendation would work? They should have. Shame on industry for blindly accepting the Class D cargo compartment modifications without evidence of success. So let's assume we could duplicate the ValuJet 592 event. The luggage, the oxygen generators, the unsecured tires. Only this time, we'll do it with the NTSB's modified smoke detectors and fire extinguishing systems installed. So the airplane takes off and is 6 minutes into the flight, 10 miles from Miami, north of Opa-locka Airport, climbing through 7,000 feet when suddenly the smoke detector goes off and the fire extinguishing system deploys a halon agent into the fire. If the NTSB had tested their theory, the fire should have been extinguished, right? Every fire requires three things: fuel, in this case, luggage and boxes, oxygen, and ignition. Halon fire retardant agents remove oxygen from the compartment's atmosphere. That's how the halon agent extinguishes a fire. It's how it works. However, there's a glitch in this duplicative scenario. As the halon depleted and the airliner turned back to Miami, was the airplane safe? Was the fire out? The Class D cargo compartment still has fuel. The luggage and boxes are still there. The ignition is still there because the oxygen generator's exothermic reaction keeps them red hot. And the fire has an endless supply of oxygen from the oxygen generators. The chemical reaction never stopped. That's why they're called oxygen generators. They generate a non-stop flow of oxygen. Fuel, ignition, and oxygen would still be present. The plane still would have crashed. Incidentally, it would not have been likely the smoke-filled Class D cargo compartment could have had enough oxygen to displace the smoke and burning tires. The oxygen generators fed the fire that doomed ValuJet 592. The oxygen generators, once started, kept the fire hot. The NTSB missed this little fact. Now, I need to clarify something. In this podcast episode, I did not mention 110 fatalities, the affected electrical and flight control systems, how the fire burned out of control, the desperate struggle of the flight crew, the different options for saving the airplane that were offered, and nor anything else. I recognize the tragic events of ValuJet 592. I don't deny them. However, ValuJet 592 accident investigation wasn't just about ValuJet 592. It was about preventing future ValuJet 592 accidents. It was about root cause. And to focus on root cause, accident investigations must never veer into emotional distractions. It must stay focused on the job at hand, determining root cause. Accident investigations must never dwell on the tragedy. They must focus on preventing another tragedy. In findings 8, 16, 20, and 34, and others as well, terms like might have, likely, and might result demonstrated the unserious manner with which this report was written. These 4 findings are just examples. These weren't serious observations, they were ambiguous statements. Might have? Likely? What are opinions doing in a factual section of the report? How incompetent can an accident report based on facts get? The Sunshine Act was developed so certain government agencies remain open to public observation, transparency. In an NTSB Sunshine meeting, all are welcome to observe, but only the NTSB investigators, NTSB management, and NTSB board members can participate in the question and answers. What type of questions and answers? Only questions and answers that make NTSB board members look smart. The Sunshine Meeting was never designed to be a display of self-centeredness. It was also never meant as the NTSB board members' personal platform for rehashing what had been cleared up by the aviation professionals during the investigation and the hearing. Even before the ValuJet 592 Sunshine Meeting, NTSB board members turned the NTSB Sunshine Meeting into a 5-board-member sarcasm review. Each board member trying to deliver the best insults against muted targets. Remember, no one can speak in the Sunshine Meeting but the NTSB. So the board members say the wackiest things. It's like a pie-in-the-face contest with artificial outrage. As mentioned in episode 8, the board members are not authorized even to pretend to be investigators. The board members' responsibilities are spelled out in Title 49, CFR Subtitle B, Chapter 8, Part 800, Section 800.2, and the revised United States Code 2023, Title 49, Subchapter 2, Section 1111. Somehow, NTSB board members haven't reviewed the regulations. Seems for years. Maybe they should be given a regulatory exam before getting Senate approval. Now, for the last few decades, NTSB board members have been more aggressive in trying to convince industry, all 5 disciplines, that board members are employable as investigators. They are not. They have no training, no experience, no knowledge, or anything else required to speak to aviation safety with authority. For aviation safety to return to center spotlight, these charades have got to stop. NTSB board members damage aviation integrity while confounding the pursuit of safety, as well as wasting time. It's bad enough NTSB investigators are inexperienced, but to have 5 board members playing junior investigator is just embarrassing. And to be clear, the Sunshine Meeting is supposed to be a conclusion to the accident investigation. The board members are supposed to ask brief questions for clarity to finalize the report before adoption. Reviewing the ValuJet 592 Sunshine Meeting on YouTube, one realizes it took well over 3 hours and 6 minutes to get through the Sunshine Meeting. One commenter on the YouTube video stated, "Oh, one board member wasn't taking any BS." That's a problem, that people think these Sunshine Meetings are supposed to be like watching WrestleMania, where board members beat up NTSB investigators for attention. Is that what the Sunshine Meeting is supposed to be about? A Sunshine Meeting should only take maybe 1/2 hour, 1 hour tops. All the information has already been gathered. So what information are the board members looking for? Weren't they paying attention in the hearing? Didn't they read the report? Obviously not. These Sunshine Meetings have devolved into wastes of time and money aimed at stroking the board members' egos. This Sunshine Meeting showed board members struggling to sound important, be relevant, come up with cool questions. Neither the 5 inexperienced board members nor the IIC sounded as if they knew what was going on. This actually exemplified why NTSB board members should never be allowed to go off script and ask questions during any accident investigation hearing. If just one of the 5 board members on the ValuJet 592 investigation had actually read the report, instead of giving their intern the job of reading it and preparing the cliff notes for them, then embarrassing investigator errors like findings number 10 and number 11 never would have gotten into the report. Someone once said, the NTSB never wastes an opportunity to waste an opportunity. I don't know who said it, but man, I wish I could get credit for that. It was clever and accurate. But author Ayn Rand once said, if a businessman makes a mistake, he suffers the consequences. If a bureaucrat makes a mistake, you suffer the consequences. Federal government is chock full of bureaucrats. They feed off the goodwill of the people. NTSB board members were and are bureaucrats. They're paper pushers, campaign bunglers, best buds with powerful people, but they don't understand aviation. Bureaucrats should never be trusted to improve aviation safety. Why? Because they have and they will continue to look out only for themselves. Until next time, I'm Stephen Carbone reminding you to tab. Think safe, act safe, be safe. God bless.